The coffee shop on Fifth Avenue was unusually crowded that Tuesday morning, but Claire Mitchell barely noticed the chaos around her. She was too focused on perfecting the foam art on the cappuccino in front of her, creating a delicate leaf pattern that had become her signature. At 27, she had worked at Rosewood Cafe for 3 years, and while it wasn't the career she'd dreamed of during her college days, it paid the bills and gave her the flexibility she desperately needed. "Mom, I'm hungry," a small voice piped up from the corner booth, where her 5-year-old twins, Mason and Mia, sat coloring in their activity books. "Just 5 more minutes, sweethearts," Claire called back, her voice warm but tinged with the exhaustion that came from being a single mother working double shifts. "Then we'll go home and make pancakes." The twins were her entire world. With their bright green eyes and dark auburn hair, they were mirror images of each other, and everyone who saw them commented on how beautiful they were. What people didn't know was the story behind their existence, a chapter of Claire's life she'd locked away 5 years ago and never spoke about. The bell above the door chimed, and Claire glanced up from her work, offering her practiced customer service smile. But the smile froze on her face as she recognized the man walking through the door. Dominic Hartwell. Her hands trembled slightly, nearly ruining the foam design. She'd seen his face countless times over the past 5 years in business magazines, on billboards, and across financial news channels. He was one of New York's youngest billionaires, having built his tech investment empire from the ground up. But seeing him in person, standing just 15 feet away, was something entirely different. He looked the same, yet different. His dark hair was styled more professionally now, with hints of grey at the temples that somehow made him more distinguished. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Claire made in 6 months, and his presence commanded attention from everyone in the cafe. Their eyes met for a brief second, and Claire's heart nearly stopped. Did he recognize her? It had been 5 years since that conference in Boston, 5 years since the night that had changed her life forever. But Dominic's gaze moved past her without a flicker of recognition, and he stepped up to the counter, where her co-worker Amanda was taking orders. Claire released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Of course, he didn't remember her. She'd been nobody to him, just a temporary marketing coordinator at the conference where he'd been the keynote speaker. Their brief encounter had meant nothing to him. "Claire, can you handle the next order?" Amanda called out, and Claire realized with growing horror that Dominic was moving down the line toward her station. "Actually, I need to check on my—" Claire started. But Amanda had already moved to help another customer. Dominic stood before her now, and Claire kept her eyes down, focusing intently on the espresso machine. "What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Large Americano, black," he said, his voice exactly as she remembered it, deep and confident. Claire nodded and busied herself with his order, her mind racing. "Just make the coffee and he'll leave," she told herself. "He doesn't remember. Why would he? You were just one of dozens of people at that conference." But as she turned to hand him the cup, disaster struck. Mason had wandered over from the booth, tugging at her apron. "Mom, Mia spilled juice on the table," he announced loudly. Claire's hands shook, and she nearly dropped Dominic's coffee. "Mason, honey, go back to your sister. I'll be right there." "But Mom—" "Mason, please." There was an edge to her voice now, born of panic. Dominic's cup was halfway to his lips when he froze. His eyes had moved from Claire to Mason, and the change in his expression was immediate and dramatic. The color drained from his face. Claire watched in slow motion as Dominic's gaze moved from Mason to the booth where Mia sat, then back to Mason, then to Claire. She could practically see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Mason had his eyes, that exact shade of steel gray that Claire had never seen on anyone else until the twins were born. And Mia, when she turned around to look at the commotion, revealed the same distinctive eyes, the same strong jawline, the same slight dimple in the left cheek that Dominic had. "How old is he?" Dominic's voice was barely audible, but there was an intensity in it that made Claire's blood run cold. "I need to clean up my daughter's mess," Claire said quickly, trying to move past him. But Dominic's hand shot out, not touching her, but blocking her path. "How old are they?" The cafe seemed to fall silent around them, though Claire knew logically that the other customers were still chatting, still ordering their morning coffee. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. "5, she whispered, because lying would be pointless. Mason would probably announce his birthday himself if asked. Dominic's jaw clenched. 5 years ago, The Boston Investment Conference, March. It wasn't a question. Claire couldn't meet his eyes. "We need to talk," Dominic said, his voice controlled but threaded with something Claire couldn't quite identify: anger, shock, betrayal. "I'm working," Claire managed to say. "Then we'll talk after your shift. I'll wait." "You can't just, I'll wait." The words were quiet but absolute. Amanda appeared at Claire's elbow, looking concerned. "Is everything okay here?" "Fine," Claire said quickly. "Just an old acquaintance." Dominic pulled out his wallet and placed a $100 bill on the counter for the coffee that cost $4. "Keep the change." His eyes never left Claire's face. "I'll be at the table by the window." As he walked away, Claire felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. For 5 years she'd kept this secret. 5 years of raising Mason and Mia alone, of telling them their father was someone who couldn't be part of their lives, of building a life that was small but safe, and now Dominic Hartwell knew. She watched as he sat down at the window table, his phone already out, probably cancelling whatever important meetings he had scheduled. His eyes kept drifting to the booth where Mason and Mia were now both staring at him with the innocent curiosity of children. Claire's shift ended in 3 hours. 3 hours to figure out what she would say, how she would explain why she'd never told him. 3 hours before her entire life changed forever. Mia waved at Dominic from across the cafe, her small hand creating a cheerful greeting. Dominic lifted his hand in a slow wave back, his expression unreadable but his eyes never leaving the little girl who had his smile. Claire closed her eyes briefly. There was no running from this. The moment she'd been dreading for 5 years had finally arrived, and all she could do was face it head-on. The question was, what would Dominic Hartwell do now that he knew he was a father? The next 3 hours were the longest of Claire's life. She went through the motions of making coffee, taking orders and wiping down tables, but her mind was elsewhere. Every few minutes her eyes would drift to the window table where Dominic sat, his laptop open, but his attention clearly divided between his screen and the twins. He hadn't moved. A billionaire who probably had a dozen assistants waiting on him, meetings worth millions of dollars, and he sat in a modest coffee shop for 3 hours, nursing a single Americano that had long gone cold. Amanda had noticed the tension. "Claire, who is that guy? He keeps staring at you and the kids." "Just someone I used to know," Claire said, scrubbing at an already clean counter with more force than necessary. "From before the twins." "Before the twins," Amanda repeated slowly, her eyes widening. Oh no. Is he?" Claire's silence was answer enough. "Does he know?" Amanda whispered. "He does now." Claire's voice cracked slightly. "Mason walked up to me right in front of him." He saw the eyes. Amanda squeezed her friend's shoulder. "What are you going to do?" "I have no idea." Claire glanced at the clock. 30 more minutes until her shift ended. 30 minutes until she had to face the conversation she'd been avoiding for 5 years. At exactly 2 o'clock, Claire untied her apron with shaking hands. She walked over to the booth where Mason and Mia had been remarkably patient, though their activity books were now completely filled with colorful scribbles. "Okay, sweethearts, time to go home," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is that man coming with us?" Mia asked, pointing directly at Dominic. "He's been watching us all day. Is he a stranger?" "You said not to talk to strangers." Claire's heart clenched. He's not a stranger. He's someone Mom knew a long time ago." Dominic had stood up and was walking toward them, his tall frame seeming to fill the small cafe. Up close, Claire could see the exhaustion around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He'd been doing his own calculations, his own thinking. "Claire." He said her name like he was testing it, making sure he'd remembered correctly. "Can we talk somewhere private? I've arranged for a car to take us to my office. There's a children's playroom there. The twins can—" "Absolutely not," Claire cut him off, her protective instincts flaring. "I'm not taking my children anywhere with someone who's essentially a stranger to them." "I'm not a stranger," Dominic said quietly. "I'm their father." The words hung in the air between them. Mason and Mia looked up with identical confused expressions. "We don't have a daddy," Mason stated matter-of-factly. "Mom said our daddy lives far away and can't visit." Dominic's expression shifted, something painful flickering across his features. "Is that what you told them?" Claire felt heat rising in her cheeks, part shame, part defensiveness. "Can we not do this here?" "Fine, then where?" Dominic pulled out his phone. I can have my driver take us to a park, somewhere public where you'll feel safe. We need to talk, Claire, you can't deny me that. She wanted to argue, wanted to grab her children and run, but she knew he was right. This conversation was 5 years overdue. Central Park, she said finally. The playground near Bethesda Fountain. We'll meet you there in an hour. I'll drive you. No, we'll take the subway like we always do. I'll meet you there in an hour, Dominic. If you want to talk, those are my terms. For a moment, she thought he might argue, might use his wealth and power to force the issue, but instead, he nodded slowly. 1 hour, I'll be there. As he walked out of the cafe, Claire felt her knees weaken. Amanda rushed over to support her. Are you okay? No, Claire admitted, but I have to do this. For the twins. The subway ride to Central Park was a blur. Mason and Mia chatted excitedly about going to the playground on a weekday, oblivious to the storm brewing in their mother's mind. Claire kept replaying that night 5 years ago, wondering what she could have done differently. She'd been 22, fresh out of college, working as a temporary marketing coordinator for a major investment conference in Boston. Dominic had been the star speaker, 28, and already making waves in the tech investment world. After his keynote speech, there had been a cocktail reception. Claire had been standing alone, intimidated by the room full of powerful people, when Dominic had approached her. He'd been charming, attentive, asking about her work and her dreams. For a few hours she'd felt seen in a way she never had before. One thing had led to another. They'd spent the night together in his hotel room, talking about everything from philosophy to their favorite books. It had felt magical, like something out of a movie, but the next morning, reality had crashed in. Dominic had received an urgent call about a business crisis and had to fly to London immediately. He'd asked for her number, promised to call, but Claire had seen the distraction in his eyes. He was already mentally gone, pulled back into his billion-dollar world. She'd written her number on the hotel notepad, but deep down she'd known he wouldn't call, and he hadn't. 6 weeks later, she'd discovered she was pregnant, with twins. She'd tried to find him, had called his office dozens of times, but had never gotten past his assistants. She'd sent emails that went unanswered. Eventually, she'd given up. What was the point? He clearly didn't remember her, didn't want anything to do with her. Why force herself into his life with this news? So she'd decided to raise the babies alone. Her parents had helped at first, but they'd passed away in a car accident when the twins were 2. Since then, it had been just the 3 of them against the world. Now as she walked toward the playground at Central Park, holding Mason and Mia's hands, she saw Dominic already there. He was sitting on a bench, still in his expensive suit, looking completely out of place among the mothers in yoga pants and fathers in casual jeans. "Go play," Claire told the twins, pointing to the jungle gym, "but stay where I can see you." They ran off with shrieks of delight, and Claire sat down on the bench beside Dominic, maintaining a careful distance between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They watched Mason and Mia climb and laugh, their identical movements synchronized in that eerie way twins often had. "They're beautiful," Dominic said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you." "Why didn't you tell me?" The question came out more hurt than angry. Claire took a deep breath. "I tried. After I found out I was pregnant, I called your office every day for 2 weeks. I sent emails to every address I could find. I never heard back." Dominic's head whipped toward her. "What? I never received any calls or emails from you." "Your assistants probably screened them out," Claire said bitterly. "I was nobody, just some temporary worker you'd spent one night with. Why would they bother you with my calls?" She watched the realization dawn on his face, followed by anger. "What name did you use? What did you tell them it was regarding?" "Claire Mitchell. I said it was personal. From the Boston conference, they always said you were busy, that you'd call back. You never did." Dominic pulled out his phone with shaking hands, typing rapidly. "What email addresses did you use?" Claire recited them from memory, addresses she'd tried so many times they were burned into her brain. Dominic's face grew darker as he scrolled through his phone. "My head of security at the time had protocols in place. Any unsolicited personal contact was automatically filtered out. I never saw any of this. Claire, I never knew." The sincerity in his voice made something crack in Claire's chest. All these years, she'd assumed he'd known and hadn't cared. The truth was somehow worse. He'd never even been given the choice. "I stopped trying after a while," Claire admitted. I figured even if I did reach you, what would I say? Remember that night 5 years ago? Surprise, you're going to be a father? You had your life, your billion-dollar empire. I had mine. You should have tried harder. There was an edge to his voice now. I was 22 years old, pregnant with twins, and terrified. Claire's voice rose, and she forced herself to lower it, conscious of the twins playing nearby. I did the best I could with what I had. I've given them a good life. They're happy, healthy, loved. And growing up without a father, Dominic finished. Growing up thinking I didn't want them. The pain in his voice was real, and Claire felt tears prick her eyes. I told them you lived far away. I didn't want them to think you'd abandoned them. I thought it was kinder than the truth, which was that I couldn't reach you, that our worlds were too different, that a billionaire wouldn't want the complication of 2 unplanned children with someone like me. Dominic turned to face her fully, his grey eyes intense. You don't know me at all if you think I would have walked away from my own children. I didn't know you at all, Claire shot back. We had one night together 5 years ago. One magical, impossible night, and then you were gone. I did call, Dominic said quietly. 3 days after I left for London. The number you gave me was wrong, 1 digit off. Claire's heart stopped. What? I tried to call. It went to some elderly man in Brooklyn who had no idea who Claire Mitchell was. I figured you'd given me a fake number, that you'd regretted the night we spent together. He laughed bitterly. I guess we both made assumptions. Claire thought back to that morning, writing her number with a shaking hand on hotel stationery. Distracted by Dominic's hurried packing, the chaos of his phone ringing, had she really transposed a digit? After all these years of thinking he hadn't cared, had it been a simple mistake? I didn't mean to, she whispered. I know. Dominic's voice was gentler now, and I should have tried harder too. I could have tracked you down if I'd really wanted to. But I had my pride, my ego. I thought you'd rejected me. They sat in silence watching Mason help Mia across the monkey bars, her small hand gripping his tightly. What happens now? Claire asked, voicing the question that terrified her most. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Now I get to know my children, and we figure out how to be a family, in whatever form that takes. Dominic, I can't just... I'm not trying to take them from you, he interrupted. But Claire, those are my children. I've missed 5 years of their lives, 5 years of first steps and first words, birthdays and bedtimes. I can't get that back, but I'll be damned if I miss another day. The determination in his voice was absolute, and Claire realized her life was never going to be the same. The carefully controlled world she'd built, just her and the twins against everything, was about to be turned upside down. And the terrifying part, a small piece of her was relieved. 5 years of carrying this weight alone had been exhausting. They don't know who you are yet, Claire said. We need to do this carefully. They're 5 years old. We can't just spring this on them. Agreed. Dominic stood up. Which is why I'm proposing we start slowly. Let me be part of their lives gradually. Let them get to know me before we tell them the truth. Claire looked up at him, this man who had changed her life twice now. And what about us? Us? Dominic's expression was unreadable. We're going to be in each other's lives now. We need to establish boundaries, expectations. This isn't about that one night anymore, Dominic. This is about 2 children who need stability. I agree. He extended his hand to her. So let's do this right. No more assumptions, no more miscommunication. We do this together, for them. Claire hesitated, then took his hand. His grip was warm, firm, and somehow familiar despite the years that had passed. For them, she agreed. As if sensing the shift in the air, Mason and Mia came running over, their faces flushed from playing. Mom, can the nice man push us on the swings? Mia asked, her green eyes wide and hopeful. Claire looked at Dominic, saw the naked longing on his face as he looked at his daughter. I think that would be okay, Claire said softly, if he wants to. I want to, Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. I'd like that very much. As she watched Dominic walk hand in hand with the twins toward the swings, their identical heights creating a perfect family portrait she'd never let herself imagine, Claire felt the first stirrings of something dangerous. Hope. The following 2 weeks fell into an unexpected rhythm that both terrified and comforted Claire. Dominic appeared at the cafe every morning at precisely 8 o'clock, ordered the same large Americano, and spent an hour with the twins before they had to leave for kindergarten. He'd become Mr. Dominic to them, the nice man who bought them hot chocolate and always had interesting stories about faraway places. Claire watched these interactions with a mixture of emotions. There was relief that Dominic was patient and gentle with Mason and Mia, never pushing too hard or overwhelming them. There was guilt that she'd kept them from each other for so long, and there was something else, something she refused to name, that stirred in her chest whenever she saw Dominic laugh at one of Mia's silly jokes or listen intently to Mason's rambling stories about dinosaurs. On the 15th day, Dominic arrived with a proposition. "I want to take them somewhere this weekend," he said, as Claire prepared his coffee. The cafe was quiet, the morning rush not yet begun. "The Children's Museum. There's a new interactive exhibit about space exploration that I think they'd love." Claire's hands stilled on the espresso machine. "Dominic, I don't know. You'd come too, of course," he added quickly. "I'm not asking to take them alone. Not yet. But Claire, they need more than an hour in a coffee shop. Let me give them experiences, opportunities." "I give them experiences," Claire said defensively. "We go to the park, the library, the free concerts in the summer." "I know you do." Dominic's voice was gentle. "You've done an incredible job with them, but let me help, please." There was something in his eyes, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. Claire realized that this wasn't about money or power. This was a father desperate to connect with his children. "Okay," she said finally. "Saturday, but we meet there, and if either of them gets overwhelmed or wants to leave, we leave immediately," Dominic finished. "I promise." Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather for October. Claire dressed the twins in their best outfits, which still looked shabby compared to what she knew Dominic was used to. But when they met him outside the museum, he didn't seem to notice. His eyes were only on Mason and Mia, drinking in every detail of their excited faces. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked, crouching down to their level. "Yes," they chorused, and Mia spontaneously grabbed his hand. Claire watched Dominic's expression transform. For a moment she thought he might cry. The museum was magical. Dominic had somehow arranged for a private tour guide, and the twins were allowed to touch and explore things other children could only look at from behind ropes. Mason was fascinated by the planetarium, asking questions that even the guide struggled to answer. Mia loved the butterfly garden, squealing with delight when one landed on her outstretched finger. "Mom, look," she called. "It likes me." Claire smiled, pulling out her old phone to take a picture. Before she could snap it, Dominic was beside her, his own phone already out. "May I?" he asked. "Of course." They stood side by side, both taking photos of their daughter's joy, and the intimacy of the moment wasn't lost on Claire. After 3 hours, they stopped for lunch at the museum cafe. The twins were chattering excitedly about everything they'd seen, talking over each other in their eagerness to share. Dominic listened to every word, asking questions, engaging with them in a way Claire had never seen from any of the few men she'd briefly dated over the years. "Mr. Dominic," Mason said suddenly, his small face serious. "Why don't you have any kids of your own?" The question hung in the air. Claire's breath caught and she saw Dominic's hand tighten around his water glass. "What makes you think I don't?" he asked carefully. "'Cause you're always alone," Mason said with the brutal honesty of children. "And you seem sad sometimes. My friend Tyler's dad is sad, 'cause Tyler's mom lives in another state. Is that why you're sad?" Claire wanted to intervene, to change the subject, but something stopped her. She watched Dominic's face, saw him wrestling with how much truth to give. "I am sad sometimes," Dominic said finally, "because I missed out on something very important. But being here with you and your sister and your mom makes me very happy." "Then you should come around more," Mia declared. "That way you won't be sad." "I'd like that very much," Dominic said, his eyes meeting Claire's over the children's heads. "If your mom says it's okay." Two pairs of identical green eyes turned to Claire, hopeful and pleading. "We'll see," Claire said, the safest answer she could manage. After lunch, as they walked through the museum's gift shop, Dominic quietly asked Claire, "When are we going to tell them?" "I don't know," Claire admitted. "Soon. They're asking questions, noticing things. But Dominic, this is going to change everything for them." "It's already changed everything," he pointed out. "Delaying just makes it harder." He was right, Claire knew. But the thought of that conversation, of seeing the confusion and possible hurt on her children's faces, made her want to run. The decision was taken out of her hands that evening. Dominic had insisted on driving them home in his town car, and the twins had fallen asleep in the back seat, exhausted from their adventure. As the driver pulled up to Claire's modest apartment building in Queens, Dominic helped carry the sleeping children upstairs. It was the first time he'd seen where they lived. Claire watched his eyes take in the small two-bedroom apartment, the second-hand furniture, the toys carefully organized in bins to maximize space. She waited for judgment, for some sign of pity or disapproval. Instead, Dominic's gaze landed on the photos covering one wall, pictures of the twins at every age, from newborns to now, birthday parties, first days of school, Christmas mornings, a complete chronicle of the life he'd missed. He stood in front of that wall for a long time, not saying anything. "Dominic," Claire started, but he held up a hand. "Give me a minute," he said roughly. Claire busied herself tucking Mason and Mia into their beds, giving Dominic space. When she returned to the living room, he was sitting on her worn couch, his head in his hands. "I missed everything," he said. "Their first words, their first steps. I should have been there, Claire. I should have been there for you too when you were pregnant and scared and alone." "You didn't know," Claire said, sitting beside him. "We've been over this." "It doesn't make it hurt less." He looked up at her, and she was startled to see tears in his eyes. "I want to give them everything. The best schools, opportunities, experiences. I want to make up for lost time. You can't buy back 5 years, Dominic." "I know that." His voice rose, then dropped immediately as he remembered the sleeping children. "I know that," he repeated quietly, "but I can give them a future. I can be there from now on, if you'll let me." "Of course I'll let you," Claire said. "They deserve to know their father." "And what about you?" Dominic turned to face her fully. "What do you deserve, Claire?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "You've been doing this alone for 5 years. Working double shifts, raising 2 kids, never asking for help. What do you want?" Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. No one had asked her that question in years. "I want my children to be happy and safe," she said finally. "That's what you want for them. What do you want for yourself?" Claire looked away, unable to meet his intense gaze. The truth was, she'd stopped thinking about what she wanted for herself the moment she'd seen those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. Her wants, her dreams, her career ambitions had all been shelved in service of survival and motherhood. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. Dominic reached out and took her hand, the gesture startling in its tenderness. "Then let me help you figure it out. Let me help with everything. Not because I'm trying to take over or because I think you can't do it yourself, but because you shouldn't have to do it alone anymore." Claire felt tears welling up. For 5 years, she'd been strong because she had to be. There was no one else to lean on, no one else to share the burden. But here was Dominic, offering exactly that. "I'm scared," she whispered. "What if we tell them, and it changes how they see me? What if they're angry I kept you from them?" "They could never be angry with you," Dominic said firmly. "You're an incredible mother, Claire. They see that every day." Before Claire could respond, a small voice came from the hallway. "Mum?" They both turned to see Mia standing there in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Claire asked, gently pulling her hand from Dominic's and going to her daughter. "I had a dream," Mia said. Then her eyes focused on Dominic, still sitting on the couch. "Mr. Dominic, are you staying for dinner?" "It's already past dinner time, honey," Claire said. "It's almost bedtime. But I wanted to ask him something." Mia walked over to Dominic with the fearlessness of children. "Mr. Dominic, do you want to be our daddy?" The room fell silent. Claire felt her heart stop. Dominic looked at Claire, then back at Mia. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because Mason said you look like us," Mia said simply. "We have the same eyes. And you're always around now, like Tyler's new daddy is always around, and you make Mom smile, which she doesn't do a lot." Claire couldn't breathe. She waited for Dominic to deflect, to change the subject, to do anything but answer that impossible question. But instead, Dominic knelt down so he was eye level with Mia. "Can I tell you a secret?" Mia nodded solemnly. "I am your daddy," Dominic said, his voice breaking slightly. "I've been your daddy since the day you and your brother were born, even though I didn't know it. And if you'll let me, I'd like to be in your life every single day from now on." Claire's hand flew to her mouth. She heard footsteps and turned to see Mason standing in the hallway, having clearly heard everything. "Really?" Mason asked, his voice small and uncertain. "You're really our dad?" Really, Dominic confirmed. I know this is confusing, and I know you probably have a lot of questions, but yes, I'm your father. Mason looked at Claire. Is he telling the truth, Mum? Claire nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. For a moment, the twins just stared at Dominic. Then Mia launched herself at him, wrapping her small arms around his neck. I wanted a daddy so bad, she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. All my friends have daddies. Dominic's arms came around her, holding her like she was made of glass. His eyes met Claire's over Mia's head, and she saw her own tears reflected there. Mason approached more cautiously. Where were you before? He asked. Why didn't you come sooner? That's my fault, Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. She knelt down to Mason's level. Daddy didn't know about you. I tried to tell him, but it was complicated, and I made some mistakes. But he's here now, and he loves you both very much. You didn't know about us? Mason asked Dominic, his young mind trying to process this information. No, Dominic said, but now that I do, I'm never leaving, if that's okay with you. Mason considered this for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, can you teach me about space? The tour guide said you know a lot about satellites and stuff. Dominic laughed, the sound slightly watery. I can teach you about anything you want to learn. Good. Mason came closer and awkwardly patted Dominic's shoulder, still processing but clearly trying. I'm glad you're not sad anymore. As Claire watched her children embrace their father, watched the three of them together forming a picture she'd never let herself imagine, she felt the weight of 5 years of secrets and struggles finally lift from her shoulders. Everything was about to change. Their small insular world was about to expand in ways Claire couldn't fully anticipate. There would be challenges ahead, adjustments to make, difficult conversations to navigate. But for the first time in 5 years, Claire wasn't facing it alone. And that made all the difference. The next 3 months transformed Claire's life in ways she never could have imagined. Dominic became a constant presence, picking up the twins from kindergarten 3 days a week, taking them to swimming lessons he'd enrolled them in, reading bedtime stories that often left all three of them sprawled across the couch in Claire's living room. But the biggest change came from an unexpected conversation one evening in late January. Claire had just finished her shift at the cafe when Dominic arrived, earlier than usual. The twins were at a play date with their friend from school, giving the adults a rare moment alone. We need to talk, Dominic said, and Claire's stomach dropped at the serious tone in his voice. Okay, she said carefully, untying her apron. About what? About this arrangement. About the future. Dominic ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was nervous. Claire, I've been thinking a lot about what's best for Mason and Mia. Here it comes, Claire thought, her heart racing. He's going to ask for custody, for more time, for control. She'd been waiting for this, for the moment when Dominic's lawyers would appear with papers and demands. I want to make sure they have every opportunity, Dominic continued. The best education, stability, security. And I want to make sure you have those things too. Dominic, if this is about money, it's not just about money. He stepped closer, his grey eyes intense. It's about us, about this family we're building. Claire, these past 3 months have been the happiest of my life. Coming here, being with the twins, with you, I don't want it to end at 8 o'clock every night when I go back to my empty penthouse. Claire's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying that I've fallen in love with our life together. Our children, yes, but also... He paused, seeming to gather courage. Also with you. Again. Or maybe still. I don't know if what I felt that night in Boston ever really went away, or if it's been growing these past months, but Claire, I'm in love with you. The words hung in the air between them. Claire felt her world tilt on its axis. You can't just say that, she whispered. Dominic, we barely know each other. We have children together, yes, but that doesn't mean, doesn't it? He moved closer still, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker grey in his eyes. I know that you take your coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of milk. I know that you hum when you're nervous, and that you always tuck your hair behind your left ear when you're thinking. I know that you read Mason and Mia the same bedtime story every Sunday night, because it was your mother's favorite. I know that you're the strongest, most incredible woman I've ever met, and that every day I fall a little more in love with the life you've built for our children. Tears were streaming down Claire's face now. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared that this is moving too fast, that we're doing this because of the twins, and not because it's right. Then let me prove it to you. Dominic took her hands in his. I bought a house. You what? A house in Westchester. 5 bedrooms, a big backyard, excellent school district, close enough to the city for my work, but with space for the kids to run and play. And before you say anything, I bought it in all 3 of our names, yours, mine, and a trust for Mason and Mia, because this isn't about me taking over or controlling things, it's about building something together. Claire shook her head, overwhelmed. Dominic, I can't just leave my life here. Your life is working double shifts at a cafe where you're overqualified and underpaid. Your life is this tiny apartment where the twins have to share a bedroom. I'm not trying to insult what you've built, Claire. I'm trying to give you the freedom to build something even better, for all of us. I don't need you to rescue me, Claire said, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm trying to love you. There's a difference. Dominic squeezed her hands. The house is there whether you say yes to me or not. It's for the twins, for their future, but I'm hoping you'll say yes to something else too. He released one of her hands and reached into his pocket. Claire's heart stopped as he pulled out a small velvet box. I'm not proposing, he said quickly, seeing her panicked expression. Not yet, but this is a promise. He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like 2 intertwined infinity symbols. A promise that I'm here for the long haul, that I want to build a life with you, not just co-parent with you. Take all the time you need to decide if you want the same thing, but know that I'm not going anywhere. Claire took the necklace with shaking hands. It was beautiful, elegant without being ostentatious. So perfectly Dominic. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll think about it. Say you'll come see the house. Say you'll give us a chance to be more than just 2 people who share children. His voice dropped lower. Say you'll let yourself be happy, Claire. You deserve that. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. The playdate was over. The twins needed to be picked up. We should go get them, Claire said, grateful for the interruption. Together, Dominic said. It wasn't a question. Together, Claire agreed. The house was perfect. Claire hated that it was perfect. She'd agreed to see it the following weekend, telling herself it was just to humor Dominic. But the moment she walked through the front door, she'd fallen in love. The twins had raced through the rooms, shrieking with delight at the playroom Dominic had already furnished. The backyard with its swing set and treehouse, the bedrooms that were each bigger than their entire current apartment. Mom, look, Mason called from upstairs. I can see the whole neighborhood from my window. There's a reading nook, Mia shouted, with pillows and everything. Claire stood in the kitchen, looking out at the yard, where she could already imagine summer barbecues and birthday parties, and felt something inside her crack open. What do you think? Dominic asked softly from behind her. I think you're making this very hard to resist, Claire admitted. Good. She could hear the smile in his voice. That's the plan. She turned to face him. Dominic, I need to know something. If I say no to the house, no to us being together romantically, would you still want to be in the twins' lives? Of course. His answer was immediate and certain. Claire, my feelings for you and my commitment to Mason and Mia are separate things. I love those kids more than anything in this world. That doesn't change regardless of what happens between us. But it would be easier if we were together, Claire pointed out. One household, one family unit. Easier, yes, but I'm not asking you to be with me for convenience. I'm asking because I love you. He stepped closer, his hands coming up to cup her face. I'm asking because when I imagine my future, you're in it. Not just as the mother of my children, but as my partner, my best friend, my love. We barely know each other, Claire protested weakly. Then let's get to know each other. Date me, Claire. Let me take you to dinner, to movies, to quiet nights in. Let me prove that what I feel is real and lasting. The twins are adaptable and resilient, and they already love seeing us together. Claire, they asked me last week when you and I were getting married. Claire's eyes widened. They what? Mia has apparently been planning the wedding in her head. Mason wants to know if he can be the ring bearer. Dominic smiled. They see what we're both too scared to admit, that we work together, that we're better together. I'm still scared, Claire whispered. So am I, Dominic admitted. I'm terrified of screwing this up, of losing you and them, but I'm more terrified of not trying, of letting fear keep me from the best thing that's ever happened to me. Claire looked into his eyes, those grey eyes that she saw every day in her children's faces, and felt her defenses crumbling. Okay, she said softly. Okay, okay, we can try. Slowly, we move into the house because it's better for the twins. We date, we get to know each other properly, and we see where this goes. The smile that broke across Dominic's face was like sunshine. Really? Really? But Dominic, I need you to understand something. Claire placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing beneath her palm. I've been taking care of myself and the twins for 5 years. I'm not going to suddenly become some dependent housewife who needs you for everything. I want to go back to school, finish my marketing degree. I want a career, not just a role as your partner. I wouldn't want it any other way, Dominic said. In fact, I was hoping you'd consider joining my company's marketing department. We could use someone with your insights, and you could work whatever hours suit the kids' schedule. Claire raised an eyebrow. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity. What you make of it is up to you. But Claire, I've seen the ideas you have. The way you think about branding and customer connection. You're wasted making coffee. I like making coffee, Claire protested, but she was smiling. Then make coffee as a hobby, but let yourself dream bigger too. He pulled her closer. Let us all dream bigger. Before Claire could respond, the twins came thundering down the stairs. Can we really live here, Mom? Mason asked, his face hopeful. Please. Pretty please, Mia added, clasping her hands together. I already told my friend Sophia that we're moving to a big house. Claire laughed, shaking her head. You told Sophia before we even decided? I knew you'd say yes, Mia said confidently. Because you love Daddy, and Daddy loves you, and we're supposed to be a family. Out of the mouths of babes, Claire thought. She looked at Dominic, saw the hope and love and promise in his eyes, and felt the last of her resistance melt away. Yes, she said, we can live here, we can be a family. The twins cheered and Dominic swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet as he spun her around. When he set her down, his lips were inches from hers. May I? He asked softly. You may, Claire whispered. The kiss was gentle, sweet, and filled with the promise of new beginnings. When they pulled apart, Mason was making exaggerated gagging noises, while Mia clapped her hands with delight. Does this mean you're getting married? Mia asked eagerly. Someday, Dominic said, his eyes never leaving Claire's face. When your mom is ready. I think she's ready now, Mason said matter-of-factly. She's been happy ever since you came back. She sings in the shower again. Claire felt her cheeks heat. Mason! It's true, he insisted. You didn't used to sing, but now you do. Dominic pulled her close again, pressing a kiss to her temple. I like the sound of that. You singing. Don't get used to it, Claire muttered, but she was smiling. 6 months later, Claire stood in the backyard of their home, watching Dominic teach the twins how to identify constellations. The summer air was warm, and lightning bugs danced in the darkness. She wore the infinity necklace Dominic had given her, and on her left hand a simple diamond engagement ring that he'd presented to her on her birthday last month. They were getting married in the fall, a small ceremony with just close friends and family. The twins were beside themselves with excitement, particularly Mia, who had opinions about every detail from the flowers to the cake. Claire had started her final year of college, taking night classes while working part-time in Dominic's marketing department. It was challenging, balancing everything, but she'd never felt more fulfilled. She had a career she was passionate about, children who were thriving, and a partner who supported her dreams while building his own alongside hers. Mom, come look, Mason called. Dad found the Big Dipper. Dad. They'd started calling him that naturally, about a month after moving into the house. The first time Mason had said it, Dominic had excused himself, and Claire had found him in the bathroom, crying happy tears. Claire walked over to her family, and Dominic pulled her into his side, his arm wrapped around her waist. See that bright star there? He was explaining to Mia. That's Polaris, the North Star. Travelers have used it for thousands of years to find their way home. Like how you found your way home to us? Mia asked. Dominic's arm tightened around Claire. Exactly like that. Claire looked up at the stars, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. 5 years ago, she'd been terrified and alone, pregnant with twins and unable to reach the man she'd shared one magical night with. She'd built a life through sheer determination and love, never imagining that the story had more chapters to write. But here they were, a family, not despite the complications and missed connections and years of separation, but perhaps because of them. They knew the value of what they had, because they knew what it was like to not have it. What are you thinking about? Dominic asked softly. "How lucky I am," Claire said honestly. "How lucky we all are." "I'm the lucky one," Dominic corrected. "I get to wake up every morning to you and our children. I get to build a life with the woman I love." "That's not luck, Claire, that's a miracle." "A miracle that started with twins who looked exactly like you," Claire teased. Dominic laughed. "Best calculation I ever made." As they stood there under the stars, their children exclaiming over each new constellation, Claire felt a peace she'd never known before. This was what home felt like. Not a place, but a feeling. Not perfect, but real and full, and theirs. 5 years ago, she'd written a wrong number on a hotel notepad and changed the course of her life. She'd raised 2 beautiful children alone, built a life from nothing, and survived when survival seemed impossible. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had Dominic, steady and loving and committed. She had Mason and Mia, growing up with both parents who adored them. She had a future that stretched out bright and full of possibility. The path that had led her here had been winding and difficult, full of pain and struggle and lonely nights. But standing here now, surrounded by the laughter of her children and the warmth of Dominic's embrace, Claire wouldn't change a single step. Because every wrong turn, every obstacle, every tear had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Home.